Welcome to The Explainer. You ever wonder how a top neuroscientist actually starts his day? Well, today we're digging into Dr. Andrew Huberman's personal morning protocol. This isn't based on guesswork. It's a step-by-step system, all engineered on hard science to achieve peak performance.
It's a question that, honestly, drives the entire self-improvement world, right? But here's the thing. The answer isn't really found in motivation or just trying harder. The secret is biology. It's about learning to work with your body's natural systems instead of fighting against them.
So, we're going to walk through his exact routine, step by step. But we're not just going to list what he does. The real magic is in understanding the why, the powerful science behind it. This is all about finding those biological levers that you can actually pull to completely change how your day feels.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start right from his first waking moments, then we'll dive into the science of light and movement. We'll look at how he fuels his brain, how he masters his energy throughout the day, and then, at the end, we'll put it all together into a blueprint you can actually use. Let's jump in.
All right, section 1. So, Huberman's day kicks off the second he wakes up. But his first move isn't what you'd think. He's not reaching for his phone or scrolling through emails. He's picking up a pen.
The very first thing he does, he writes down his exact wake-up time. Now, this might sound kind of trivial, right? But it's actually the anchor for his entire day. See, his phone is on airplane mode, so this data point is totally pure. It creates this precise timestamp that's going to dictate the timing of everything else, especially his caffeine, which, trust me, we'll get to later.
So, once that anchor is set, he moves on to what is, honestly, probably the most powerful part of this whole routine, getting outside and getting moving.
Now, the goal of this morning walk isn't what you might think. It's not about exercise, it's not about burning calories. It's way more precise, more neurological than that. The whole point is to intentionally shift his brain into a state of calm alertness. That's a really delicate balance, and he pulls it off by using two super powerful, totally natural tools.
To get to that calm state, you've first got to manage your brain's internal alarm system, the amygdala. You can think of it like a smoke detector that's just a little bit too sensitive. When it's overactive, it just floods you with stress and anxiety. So the first goal of the morning is to gently dial it back down.
And the solution is just brilliantly simple. The rhythmic physical act of walking forward, what scientists call forward ambulation, has been shown in actual peer-reviewed studies to naturally quiet that amygdala down.
So how does that work? Well, the mechanism behind this is called optic flow. As you walk forward and the world streams past your eyes, this visual pattern sends a primal signal to your brain that you're moving away from danger. It's basically telling your brain, hey, everything's cool, you can stand down, and that directly reduces activity in your anxiety center. It's like a built-in off switch for stress. Okay, so forward motion takes care of the calm part, but that's only half the equation, right? You don't want to be calm and sleepy. You want to be calm and alert. And for that, he pairs his walk with another incredibly powerful tool. And that tool is sunlight. He makes sure his walk is always outdoors. He actually calls getting morning sun perhaps the most important thing that any of us can and should do for our well-being. This isn't just about vitamin D. Morning light hits these special cells in your eyes, and that sends a massive wake-up signal directly to your brain's master clock. It kickstarts everything from your mood to your metabolism. And you know what the best part is? The dosage is super flexible. On a clear, bright day, believe it or not, even just 2 minutes is enough to trigger that critical signal. Now, a better target for most days is about 10 minutes. That's going to really make sure you lock in that benefit for the whole day.
And if it's an overcast day, when the light is less intense, aiming for 30 minutes is absolutely ideal. You got to remember, even the cloudiest day gives you thousands of times more of a specific light your brain needs than any indoor bulb ever could. Okay, so after the walk, it's time to fuel the brain. But before any food, before any caffeine, the very first step is hydration, but with a really specific scientific twist.
So he drinks a big glass of water. We're talking 16 to 32 ounces. But here's the key, the little trick. He adds a tiny pinch of sea salt. See, after we sleep, we're naturally dehydrated, and our neurons, they don't just run on plain water. They need electrolytes, like sodium, to fire correctly. This super simple trick makes sure his entire nervous system is primed and ready to go from the very first sip. Now, all of these habits are powerful on their own, but their real impact comes from the timing. It's not just what you do, it's when you do it. And that brings us to two of the most common morning things, caffeine and food. Okay, this next habit, this is a total game changer for afternoon energy. Huberman deliberately waits 90 to 120 minutes after he wakes up before he has his first coffee. And the reason is simple, but it's so powerful. This is the key to avoiding that awful 3 p.m. crash we all know.
To get why this works, we need to talk about a chemical called adenosine. Just think of it as sleepiness fuel. It builds up all day long, and that's what makes you feel tired. While you sleep, your body clears most of it out, but there's always a little bit left over in the morning. Now, if you drink coffee right away, the caffeine just blocks the adenosine. It's like putting a temporary dam in front of it. A few hours later, when that caffeine wears off, the dam breaks, and all that leftover sleepiness hits you at once, and that's the crash. By waiting, you just let your body naturally finish cleaning it out first. No dam, no crash.
And finally, he uses strategic fasting to boost his focus. By putting off his first meal until around 11 a.m. or noon, his body stays in a fasted state, which gently increases his adrenaline levels. Now, I know we usually associate adrenaline with stress, but in these controlled amounts, it's actually a powerful cognitive enhancer. It's been proven to sharpen your focus and improve your ability to learn new things.
So that's all the science, but what does it actually look like in practice? Let's put all these pieces together into one simple, actionable blueprint.
And here it is, the full blueprint. You log your time to create that anchor. You walk outside to calm your anxiety. You get sunlight to boost your alertness. You hydrate with salt for your neural function. You delay caffeine to prevent that afternoon crash. And you fast to sharpen your focus. You see, every single step is a deliberate tool to engineer your own biology for an optimal day.
Look, the goal here isn't to perfectly copy this entire routine tomorrow. The real power is in understanding the tools. So just pick one. Maybe it's just delaying your coffee, or maybe it's just getting those 2 minutes of sunlight. Look at this blueprint and ask yourself, what's the one single habit you're going to try tomorrow?
If you're into health or science, you've almost certainly heard of Andrew Huberman. But who is the man behind one of the most popular podcasts on the planet? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and find out. All right, let's get into it. First, we're going to look at the huge public platform he's built. Then we'll dig into the really serious science that's under the hood, his credentials, his lab work, and finally, how he's building this whole new kind of brand in science communication. So first up, you've got to understand the scale we're talking about here. The Huberman Lab podcast isn't some niche show just for scientists. No way. It's a global phenomenon that has seriously changed how millions of people think about their own health. And just to give you some perspective on his reach, check out this number. Over 700,000. Now that's not his podcast audience. Nope, that's just the number of people who subscribe to his monthly newsletter, all waiting to get those science-based tools sent straight to their inbox. And then there's the podcast itself. It only started in 2021, and it just exploded. It's almost always number one in its categories, and it often cracks the top 10 of all podcasts worldwide. We're talking up there with the biggest news and true crime shows. For a science show, that's just unheard of. So who exactly is the guy at the center of all this? To really get it, you have to understand that he's living in two different worlds, but they're deeply, deeply connected. On one hand, you've got the guy we all see, the identity the whole world knows him by, the podcast host. He's the voice millions of people choose to listen to for hours every single week, trusting him to break down some really complex science. But that's only half the story. The other hat he wears is very different. Behind the mic, his day job is being a tenured professor and a working scientist at the Stanford School of Medicine, one of the absolute best research institutions in the world. And let's be super clear here, this isn't some honorary title. He is the real deal, a tenured professor with active roles in the Department of Neurobiology and even in psychiatry and behavioral sciences. First and foremost, he's a full-time practicing scientist. A huge part of his academic research has been focused on this one key idea, neuroplasticity. Now, what does that mean? Put simply, it's the idea that our brains can literally change and rewire themselves based on our experiences. This one concept, it's the bedrock for pretty much every tool and protocol he talks about on his show. Okay, so he's a professor at Stanford, but is he, legit? Let's take a look at the hard evidence of his expertise, the kind of stuff that gets respect from other scientists. His career is stacked with serious recognition from his peers. He's been a McKnight Fellow, a Pew Foundation Fellow, and back in 2017, he won the Kogan Award. Look, in the world of science, these are a huge deal. They're major stamps of approval that say your work really matters. And that Kogan Award, it's a big one.
It's given specifically to, and I'm quoting here, the scientists making the most significant discoveries in the study of vision. That tells you he's a leader in his specific field.
But maybe the clearest sign of a top-tier scientist is where their research gets published. The Huberman Lab's work shows up in what are basically the big three of science journals: Nature, Science, and Cell. To put that in perspective, getting published in just one of these is a career-defining moment for most scientists. So this brings up a pretty big question, right? How does a leading academic who studies the biology of vision become the world's go-to guy for advice on sleep, fitness, and focus? It seems like a jump. Well, the connection is what his lab actually focuses on. They study how these really fundamental things like seeing and breathing can directly change our brain states, our performance, and even our emotions like courage and fear. It's all about using your body as a set of levers to control your mind. And that's where the magic happens. That deep, complex research gets turned into practical, step-by-step toolkits that he calls protocols. And the best part? They're usually totally free. So he takes what the lab learns about how light affects the brain and turns it into a toolkit anyone can use to sleep better. And now he's putting this whole approach into a book, basically creating an operating manual for the human body that, let's be honest, we all probably wish we were born with. So when you put all of it together, the podcast, the professorship, the protocols, what you're really looking at is something totally new. A powerful, multifaceted brand in the world of science communication, or SciComm. I mean, just look at all the different hats he wears. He's the Stanford professor, sure, but he's also the podcast host, the co-founder of his own media company, and an advisor to all sorts of businesses in the health and science space. He's working on all fronts at once. And you know what? People are noticing, big time. When you start getting featured in huge outlets like Time, the BBC, and Scientific American, it means the world is recognizing that your approach to communicating science is not only different, but really, really impactful.
So, this all leaves us with one final big idea to think about. Andrew Huberman is creating a whole new playbook for how science gets shared with the world. And it raises this fascinating question for the future. What does it mean for science, and for all of us, when the research lab itself becomes a global household brand?